6 years ago now, I was doing the 4-pass loop outside of Aspen, and I was living in DC at sea level at the time, and we were planning to do the 4-pass loop as a single day run, and I got serious altitude sickness, and specifically I got high altitude cerebral edema, high altitude pulmonary edema, and then severe hyponatremia. And I was in a coma for several days. Mountain Rescue Aspen saved my butt. And yeah, so that's sort of in a nutshell what happened. And definitely that reoriented my way of seeing the world and also, my own stance on life.
Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. Through personal and professional connections in the running world, I have the privilege of getting to know some amazing athletes. I've always been fascinated by the psychological aspects of running and what helps people to achieve success, however they define it, and this podcast is aimed at exploring this and much more. I hope you enjoy. We are proud to share that this episode is sponsored by our friends over at Puma. Here at For the Long Run podcast, we're fans of Puma and have been really impressed with their efforts to support and foster the running community. We're excited to partner with a brand that has such a rich history in sports and that cares deeply about the running community. Puma believes that sometimes all it takes is a spark to make a change, to get motivated, or to try something new or hard. And we couldn't agree more. All we need is that small spark, and the actions will follow to get us there. With that small flicker, anything is possible. Puma running shoes offers supreme cushioning, superior propulsion, comfort, and lightweight technology. I've been running in the DV8 Nitro First Mile, and I love how it has a focus on sustainability. The shoe feels amazing, and even better, it's in collaboration with First Mile. It's made from at least 20% recycled material, as First Mile's focus is on cutting down plastic waste in production and in the supply chain by finding innovative ways to get recycled plastic into products like Puma running shoes. Check out a pair for yourself at puma.com and use the code FORTHELONGRUN for 20% off any Puma Run or Train products. When you support Puma, you support me and the rest of the For the Long Run podcast team. Thanks again to Puma for sponsoring us. I have a super important question for you. Are you giving your body the nutrients it needs to help bolster and protect your immune system? How do you know? Friends, I'm here to help you eliminate the guesswork with 2 products that have had a huge impact on keeping me healthy and strong during my training and races that I strongly encourage you to try. Previnex Probiotic and Previnex Immune Health Plus are powerhouse products that can help you perform at your best and keep you healthy, especially as we move into a season where bugs that can take you down are everywhere. Use code FTLR for 15% off your purchase at Previnex.com. That's Previnex.com. We are psyched to announce a new partner of the podcast, Lauren Daniels. Lauren is a realtor helping buyers and sellers in the greater Denver and Boulder area and beyond, and has been a good friend of mine for a few years now. When I decided I wanted to buy a place in Boulder and put down roots here, I was completely overwhelmed by the home buying process. Lauren was already a good friend, so when we first talked about home buying, I felt a huge sense of relief. She's a neighborhood expert, has an incredible attention to detail, available for any and all questions, and made what could be a very difficult process super easy. And now we've got a beautiful home in Boulder. It's close to the trails with a big backyard for Alfie and views of the Flatirons. So if you're even considering buying a home in the area or anywhere, I highly recommend working with Lauren. You can reach her at ldaniels@milehighmodern.com and let her know we sent you. That's ldaniels@milehighmodern.com. Thanks so much to Lauren for supporting the podcast and helping us continue to grow, and for all those miles together. And we're back. We've got Wookie Kim joining me from
North Shore, Hawaii.
Beautiful place. The waves are rolling, and we're here in Hawaii.
Yeah.
The first question of this podcast is always a tough one, so we'll start there. Who is Wookie?
Who is Wookie? Well, I guess I can use my Instagram tagline, which is that I'm a husband and civil rights lawyer who also likes running lots of trails.
Nice.
So that's who I am in a nutshell.
Cool. We're going to unpack all of that. So your husband, you're a civil rights lawyer, you're a runner, all of the above. Do you remember your first run?
First run? Probably. I mean, first running race, I definitely remember that, but I don't know about my first run. I mean, I guess I played some sports growing up,
Yep.
but yeah, I mean, I think I wasn't very athletic growing up, and my parents, encouraged me to play different sports, but I guess I was active and moving about, and it wasn't until high school that I really started running once I realized I was a failed aspiring soccer player who
Yep.
had no coordination. So, yeah.
So a few years have gone by. You've gotten into trail running.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
So I think trail running, where that came from is just wanting to always test my limits and push further. And I had spent a few years focusing on, road marathoning, and decided that, I wanted to try the ultra marathon world, or to try to enter that world. And I think really I wanted to explore the world as well. I think getting out on the trails is one of the best ways to see the world out there. Yeah.
So you dove right in, and what was it like? You said you came from a road marathon background.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, at first I just wanted to finish, and the first ultra I did was the JFK 50, and that was tough because I wasn't used to running on trails at all. And the portion on the AT, I sprained my ankle early on in the race, so basically hobbled through the rest of the race. But it was just such a exhilarating experience to go, double the distance that I'd previously gone before. And I guess I'm always trying to test my limits further, and that ended up going progressed to the 100-mile distance, and that's sort of where I've landed. And I don't really want to go longer than that.
It's crazy that people do, but people do. So, okay, you're lined up at the JFK 50. That was your first ultra distance. Many people will go marathon to 50K to 50 mile and beyond. You went marathon to 50 mile on a gnarly competitive course and race. Do you remember the feelings you had at that starting line?
Definitely a lot of nerves. I think the JFK 50 is one of the larger races, and so it still had a road race vibe.
There are 10,000 people that do it, or 1,000?
Oh, it's a few thousand.
5,000.
I think it's a couple thousand, so it's not in the five figures. But that was in 2015 or 2016? So a while ago now at this point. But I don't really remember. I don't really remember the details. It was definitely. I was very nervous, and but my only goal was to just cross that finish line, which I accomplished. So I'm proud of that.
So I've seen you cross one finish line. It was Run Rabbit in 2019. You promised to swear off of 100 milers. I believe your words were, "I'm never fucking doing that again," or something similar. Talk to me about the 100-mile distance, and what is it about it that you seem to like?
That's a good question. I don't really know. I mean, I think it's sort of that distance just long enough where you get to see two sunrises, and that to me is sort of the threshold of something truly epic. I remember doing my first 100 and being moved to tears when I entered my second sunrise of the race. But 100 is a nice, pleasing number aesthetically, and the idea of doing roughly 4 marathons in a day is also cool. But yeah, I mean, I guess I never really set out necessarily to hit the 100-mile distance, but I've always wanted to push myself further. And, I've done a variety of different, I did an Ironman triathlon when I was still a teenager, and I was one of the youngest finishers of that Ironman in Wisconsin, and biked across the country one summer, and just I like challenging myself in different ways. And it's always about just seeing the world, testing your limits, and just really having fun out there. So
a lot of people, when they use the phrase testing their limits or finding their limits, it's hyperbole, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Yeah.
In a literal sense, you've literally found your limits and then pushed beyond it. Do you want to talk about that for a second and share with the audience what it was like truly? First, what happened, and second, from what you do remember, what was that experience like?
Sure. So 6 years ago now, I was doing the four pass loop outside of Aspen, and I was living in DC at sea level at the time, and we were planning to do the four pass loop as a single day run. And long story short, I got serious altitude sickness, and specifically, I got high altitude cerebral edema, high altitude pulmonary edema, and then also, as a result, severe hyponatremia. And I was in a coma for several days. Mountain Rescue Aspen saved my butt. And so that's sort of in a nutshell what happened. And definitely that reoriented my way of seeing the world and also, my own stance on life. Yeah.
How did that go? How did that go down? You realized that I'm in trouble, or was it like you were in trouble and then you woke up 3 days later?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things where, I'm generally pretty self-aware. I know how I'm feeling as I'm doing events or doing races. And it was one of those things where, of course, I started feeling the altitude. I started feeling dizzy or lightheaded or getting a headache. But at a certain point, we were, 8 to 10 hours in, and I realized that this was not normal altitude illness because I was starting to lose my vision. The headache was so splitting that it was even hard to just, exist. Just to be. And so I sort of had a mini panic moment, or at least with my friend that I was with, and we decided to just stop, sit, drink some water, and reevaluate what our plan was. But where we were located was in the valley between the second and third passes. And so there weren't really any reasonable escape options that did not require, serious, strenuous
advanced
activity.
Equipment.
Yeah. So that's where we found ourselves. And, at that point, I was just determined to get off the trail. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to. And I went unconscious, ironically, 3/4 of a mile or so from the trailhead as we were descending back down to the parking lot. So, if I'd hung on for another hour, I would have been much better, I think, than in a coma.
So for those who don't know, a four pass loop is you hit 4 12,000 foot passes in 28-ish miles. It's mostly above 10,000 feet. The beginning is at 9,500 feet, and that's the lowest point. And to come from 5,000 feet to do it felt strenuous, and to come from sea level is quite a tall task. So just framing for context there of what that adventure was. So again, I mentioned that often trail runners love to use the phrase, or runners love to use the phrase, "Oh, I found my limits," or I love chasing my limits. I'm curious how you juxtapose that with your adventures going forward, where you've gone too far, you've felt what it's like to go too far. That's a feeling that most people never have, or maybe they think they have it, and whatever.
Right.
Does that come up in future adventures?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I'm much more cognizant of risk these days, and I try to, always have a plan. But that said, I mean, even since that incident, I've had some close calls. And last summer, actually, I was doing the Madahe 100, and it's out in the Badlands in North Dakota. And long story short, I also did not make it off the trail and had to be rescued. There was record-breaking heat, or it was extremely hot that day, and I just miscalculated as far as being prepared for the heat and all of that. But ultimately, I have been more. Ironically, I'm saying this, that I try to be more conservative and be more aware of, what the race conditions are going to be like, what the associated risks are, and making sure to carry enough whatever gear, food, water, nutrition. And one thing that I'm planning to do in the near future is get a Garmin InReach, just so that I have it. And even in Hawaii, while I'm on trails that are pretty, I don't go off the beaten path all that often. there's still a lot of risk there. And, you can easily slip and fall 1,000 feet, and, you might not make it out alive. And in fact, a few months ago, there was a very experienced outdoorsman who, super experienced hiker. He just went missing, and people went out to search for him, and they found his body, and he had fallen 1,000 feet. And, there was no one knew exactly where he was, and he didn't have a beacon or anything like that. And so it made me even more aware of, the everyday things that I'm doing can be really risky. So interestingly, my wife has not pleaded with me to stop. I think she knows that this is going to be, this is a part of me. But that said, I am thinking more carefully about the races that I do. I don't pick races with the intention of putting myself in risky situations. I think what I really like is seeing how far I can push my own body, but not necessarily, it's not about being in the most extreme conditions. I'd rather have optimal conditions and push myself in that context. So I have no desire to do, for example, like the Badwater or, I don't know, but things like, so I did the Hurt 100 in 2019. That's the kind of race I like because it's a lot of elevation gain, but it's a safe course. And
20-mile loop.
20-mile loop. It's right outside downtown Honolulu. So, very easy access to
you run it all the
time.
Pick up Taco Bell.
Yep, pick up Taco Bell on the way home from the loop. But that's a kind of race that excites me. It's, so I think my parents think that somehow I like putting myself in life-threatening situations, and that's just not true.
So you talk about optimal conditions. We're here. It's February. In theory, it's winter. We've run together, and oh my God, I don't think I've ever sweat that much. And it's February. Talk to me about the running community in Hawaii. You've been here for a couple of years. You're not from the area, but you've been here for what, 5 years now?
Been here over half a decade now, 5 years. Yeah.
So what brought you out here? What keeps you here? Besides, I mean, it's like cloudy out and it looks gorgeous. We should be on video, so hopefully some people can see what's going on behind us. We've got palm trees, we've got big waves, and I see someone surfing. This is awesome. Shout out if you're listening to this podcast on an audio format. You can now watch on YouTube, and we've also got some cool clips. So anyway, what brought you here? What keeps you here?
Yeah, what brought me here was after my near-death incident, I really had to reflect on the life path that I was taking. And at the time, I was working for a big corporate law firm in DC and, working really insane, miserable hours. And basically, I just decided that I wasn't going to put off until tomorrow the things that I wanted to do today. And so at that point, I really shifted into figuring out how I was going to transition into the dream job or the dream career that I wanted to pursue, which was to be a civil rights lawyer. And so I also thought about moving away from DC and moving into a community where work-life balance was valued and where also there was better access to the outdoors. And then finally, of course, the last criterion is being somewhere where there are good, progressive, legal, civil rights job opportunities. So I started applying to openings in Denver, Seattle. I was looking at Portland, Oregon, Bay Area, LA. And then at some point, I just came across the job posting for a staff attorney position at the ACLU of Hawaii and decided why not? ACLU is a dream organization, civil rights organization, and decided to throw my name into the hat and came out for the interview and sort of fell in love with Honolulu and the idea of being a civil rights lawyer here. And that was over 5 years ago, and never really looked back. So,
and talk to me about the work that you do. What does a day-to-day look like for you?
Sure. So, the ACLU, we're a nonpartisan, nonprofit civil rights organization. I'm currently the legal director here at the ACLU of Hawaii, which is our state affiliate. We're a large federated organization. The work that I do right now So I lead our legal program, which means, we file lawsuits, we threaten to file lawsuits. The three issues that we're sort of prioritizing are decriminalizing poverty and houselessness, smart justice, which is about addressing mass incarceration, and then reimagining policing. So thinking about how to hold police accountable and how to also change the role of police, that we shouldn't be, as a knee-jerk reaction, calling police to address, someone in mental health crisis or what have you. So, I work, we have lawsuits in all of those areas, several police misconduct lawsuits. We have lawsuits challenging the criminalization of houselessness, where people are losing their property without due process. And then we also have, those aren't the only issues we work on. So we have a Title IX athletics lawsuit involving the unequal treatment of the girls' teams at Hawaii's largest public high school relative to the boys' teams. And then we also have an abortion access lawsuit involving access to mifepristone, which is the one of the drugs used for medication abortions. So busy docket, diverse docket, and but all of the work is intended to help people who are otherwise marginalized or don't have equal access under the law. And so that is, to me, very motivating to be able to work on behalf of those groups.
20 years ago, is this what you imagined yourself to be doing?
20 years ago. So let's see, as a teenager.
Like
honestly,
when did this as your life passion come to play?
So probably right after college, when I was in DC, I was teaching in DC public schools through Teach for America, and I think it was during that experience for the first time where I realized that I wanted to devote my career towards helping address inequality in our society. And I was already curious about going to law school, and my dad is a lawyer, very different type of law, does aircraft financing. But I was sort of thinking about law school already, but it was through that experience and seeing how educational opportunities and the disparities there can lead to huge disparities in life opportunities more generally, and wanting to play some role in addressing those issues. That was what motivated me to become sort of a civil rights lawyer, or to at least be a public interest lawyer. And so all through law school, I was part of the Education Law Clinic representing students with special needs. And I worked at the Connecticut Legal Services, their housing unit, representing people low-income tenants who are being evicted. And this was right after the 2009 financial crisis, and there were all those there are all these efforts to protect tenants who were in foreclosed homes. And so it just over the years my lens became broader, though, because I realized originally I thought I was going to focus on education, but then I realized the relationship between education and housing. Your educational opportunities are often tied to the zip code in which you are living, and then that leads to broader questions about segregation and our pattern of history of racial discrimination in the United States. So it just kept
unpacking and opening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then I sort of decided, I'll just work at an organization that addresses civil rights issues more broadly. And the ACLU is one of the preeminent organizations, and so the idea of working for them was very appealing.
If you've been enjoying this podcast and can spare 90 seconds of your time today, can you do me a favor? Can you pop over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review? It helps other people find and enjoy the podcast too. Thanks so much. This episode of For the Long Run podcast is sponsored by Puma. For 75 years, Puma has been pushing sports and culture forward with innovative design and development. We are honored to have Puma supporting this show and supporting the running community at large. My greatest compliment for running shoe is, I didn't think about it once. The purpose of having the right gear is to enable you to do anything you want out there. When I'm running in Puma's DV8 Nitro First Mile, all I'm thinking about is literally anything else. I think about the community. I think about why trying hard things is so rewarding. I think about how cute Alfie is. And I think about how much I love tacos. And I think about the big things like how I want to leave each place I inhabit better than I found it. You know what I'm not thinking about? What's on my feet. And that's the best thing about Puma running shoes. They're designed to help you get out there effortlessly so you don't have to worry about what's on your feet. Just need to worry about putting one foot in front of the other. Check out a pair for yourself at puma.com and use the code FORTHELONGRUN, all one word, for 20% off. Again, when you support Puma, you're supporting me and the rest of the podcast team. Thanks again to Puma for supporting us. I got to talk about this last season of training for a second. So while training for a CIM, I've hit the highest weekly mileage I've ever hit and highest monthly mileage I've ever hit. What's really cool about that is I feel awesome. I feel like I can just keep running and running and running, and I also have the energy for everything else in life. I haven't gotten sick, even despite those around me getting sick. Not even the sniffles for me. And I obviously can't pin this on a single thing, but I've been really diligent about taking Previnex's Immune Health Plus and probiotic incredibly diligently. I've been taking that every single day since March, and it's helping. So I encourage you to check it out and use code FTLR at checkout for 15% off at Previnex.com. Is it a good market to buy a home in? What about to sell a home? What even goes on in the housing market? How do you even keep track? Well, good news for you, you don't have to know all the answers if you're interested in buying or selling your home, because you can just work with the best realtor around, Lauren Daniels. Whether you're thinking of buying or selling your home, Lauren is your go-to. She treats every client with care and helps make what could be a very scary process, dare I say, fun. Lauren helps you get organized and stay on top of important deadlines and guides you towards the right home for you instead of pushing you towards something that doesn't feel right. Even if you're not ready yet or you're not in the Denver or Boulder area, we highly recommend following Lauren on Instagram because she's always sharing great information about the housing market. Give her a follow at lauren.in.colorado on Instagram. And if you're already ready to start the conversation, give her a shout at ldaniels@milehighmodern.com and let her know we sent you. That's ldaniels@milehighmodern.com. I want to dive more into your work as well, but I'm super intrigued by what you said about, like, after your incident, you had to think about what you were doing here, and the second chance you may have been given, and you decided to leave DC and pursue something that you felt to be more meaningful and more contributing towards, like, moving the world forward.
Yep.
A lot of people have these thoughts and they're like, oh, my job, I hate my job. I'm just a cog in the system. I don't feel like I'm having an impact. I'm not saying that was the case for you. I'm saying you took steps to have an impact and to feel like you're a part of a community and to feel like you're not taking advantage of the opportunities that you have. What was that process like where you said, okay, maybe my life is pretty good, and I think it can be better, and I think I can do more, and yeah. What was that process like? And the reason I ask is if someone's listening and they're nodding along and saying, wow, this is hitting and this resonates. Right. I wonder like how he actually made that change. How did you make that change, or what was the mental unpacking that you had to go through before you were actually ready?
Yeah, well, so, after I regained consciousness out of my coma, it was a long road to recovery, and I had a lot of time to reflect. And I remember after I was discharged from the hospital, my mom flew back with me to DC, and she stayed with me for a few weeks, just, feeding me and taking care of me. But those days, I was spending 18 hours a day sleeping, maybe more. I would sleep for 12, 14 hours straight, and then I would wake up and I'd just be napping all day. But when I was awake, I remember just sitting on the couch, staring out the window and just looking at the clouds. And in other words, the only thing I could really do was reflect or think. And so, just having that space to think about my life, and it really became clear from being so close to death and realizing that, right, it's a very trite saying, but you never know if you'll be here tomorrow. Right. That really hit it really resonated with me, and it just prompted me to reorient how I think about things in the future, right? I think I was always someone who is focused on planning ahead and, thinking about the long-term plan.
For the long run.
For the long run, exactly. Rather than, whatever you want to call it, rather than sort of focusing on the present or living in the moment. And so, I think I'm much better at that now. And in order to get where you want to be in life, I think sometimes you do need to take that leap of faith, whatever it may be, and depart from the script or the plan that you already have in your head. And sometimes it just needs to happen in the now without worrying about the long-term consequences, let's say. So yeah, I mean, at the same time, making this transition wasn't easy. Even when I had made the decision to leave this corporate, whatever.
Probably being paid well.
Oh yeah, I was being paid. Yes, I was being paid very well, and that was hard. That was also hard as well. But I think I'm trying to avoid ever having the golden handcuffs on.
Yep.
And so my lifestyle now is very different as a nonprofit lawyer. But as a lot of people say, what I value the most isn't necessarily the material things in life. It's the experiences and the memories, and that's also partly why I love ultra running, and I love picking races where I get to see the world. And so I'm not one who likes to do the same race over and over again. With the limited opportunities that I have to race, if I'm only doing one or two big races a year, and I'm already 36, there's a few more several dozen more race opportunities that I'm going to have, and so I have to be selective about what I'm doing with each one. So yeah.
I find it fascinating when people pivot in this way. And to me, I feel stasis is the enemy. And anytime you're comfortable, you should be afraid, because that's where bad things happen, in my opinion, and in my experience. And whether it's in relationships, whether it's in work, whether it's in life in general, I think that when we get into these places where we feel too comfortable, we get bored and lazy, and we're not doing as much as we can. And for some, that's totally fine. That's how people choose to live their life. It's probably how 80% of America chooses to live its life, or 90%. And for the most part, maybe that's fine. But I do feel that the running community in particular should be afraid of stasis. And we know how to set goals. We know how to get uncomfortable. And it's a cool opportunity for people to do impactful things and live their life in a way that isn't just sort of an even keel. And to me, it's the ebbs and flows that make things super interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe too interesting sometimes, but definitely interesting nonetheless.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think people generally tend to think that I'm someone who always sees the glass as half full rather than half empty. And so I reflect on this experience on the 4-pass loop. I wish it hadn't happened, but to some degree, I'm almost glad that it happened, at least in the way that it did, where I didn't have any long-term brain damage or.
Right.
I think
you got pretty lucky.
We'd be having a very different conversation if I had long-term brain damage. But the point is, you learn so much from those failures, right? This was just, maybe failure isn't the right word here, but the point is you learn from adversity, and it's the failures, it's the adversity that gets you out of that stasis, because up until then you're sort of on cruise control.
Right.
And when you have these really jarring life moments, you then have, everything that you thought was secure is no longer secure, and you sort of have to reorient and then reprioritize and reevaluate. And that process was so critical for me. And, I'm again grateful to have had that opportunity, even though it came with a lot of trauma, a lot of drama, and a lot of tears. And yes, I think my parents were under a lot of stress, and so was my then girlfriend and now wife. And I feel bad that they had to worry about me for so many days, but But yeah, all that being said, it was still, I'm grateful for having had that opportunity to learn from that really awful incident.
Do you think we'd be having this conversation on Oahu in 2023 had you not had that event? Would you still be in DC?
Probably still would be in DC. Yeah, I mean, genuinely, it was that incident that prompted me to just do something different, to really change my life orientation. And yeah, I never would have considered moving to Hawaii under really any circumstance. As a lawyer, you sort of gravitate towards these big legal job market cities like New York, DC, maybe the Bay Area. But the thought of being a lawyer in Hawaii, it didn't even really compute. And so we would not be having this conversation had that incident not occurred, for sure. It was the sort of life-defining moment for me. I mean, obviously the day I got married to my wife was very special. But as far as the one incident or one experience that really, changed the course trajectory of my life, I can't think of a more impactful moment. And again, I have mixed feelings about it, but ultimately, the fact that I was able to draw positive from it and not negative, and even with running too, it would have been very easy to just sort of decide, okay, I'm done. I'm not doing ultra running. I'm not going to high altitude. I'm not doing anything like that. But I have slowly built back my confidence, my abilities. And, it was a few years after that incident that I did Run Rabbit Run, which is also at high altitude, up outside.
Starts at 6,200 feet, a more reasonable altitude.
Yeah, more reasonable altitude. But, good chunk of the race is at 11,000 plus. And so I did that. And the goal wasn't to prove to myself that I could be at altitude again, but that was it was nice being able to tell myself, oh, you know what, maybe that was a fluke. And then more recently, last summer, I did the Mauna Kea Sea to Summit. So we started at the bay front in Hilo at sea level, touched the water, and then we ran to the almost 14,000 foot summit of Mauna Kea, 42 miles. And just doing that. And that was tough. And I felt the altitude by the top, but, it showed that I can still do really cool things and I don't have to be afraid of altitude. But of course, yeah, I'm much more cautious about altitude and everything.
Makes sense. How did you get down from that one?
So we had crew.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, we had. So, oh yeah, no,
you run it back.
No, that would be awful. But no, we had picture perfect conditions. I mean, that was the most. I think that was one of the most, if not the most meaningful running experience I've had. I think it's more memorable or meaningful than even some of the 100-milers that I've done, just because going from sea level to 14,000 feet in one stretch and seeing and being at the top,
touch the ocean, see the
looking over onto the horizon and being like, I started there this morning.
That's so cool.
It's kind of a incomprehensible feeling. I was moved to tears when I made it to the summit. And so yeah, I love run ventures like that. And definitely as I get older, my priority is going to be doing run ventures with friends and less about actually doing races, because I think I derive just as much joy and wonder from those run ventures.
Totally. I posted on Instagram yesterday that my why is basically to be able to be fit enough to have adventures with friends in cool places and hurt a little bit and have a lot of fun. One of the things I've noticed about Hawaii is the extreme diversity in terms of the people here. As a white person, I feel like I'm potentially in the minority here, which is an interesting feeling as someone who has never felt that.
Yep.
Talk to me about the people here, the experience of being here, being amongst Native Hawaiians, people who have been here for generations, and everything that entails. There's a lot of pride I'm sensing.
Yeah. I mean, Hawaii is it's a unique place in many, many senses, and definitely the people here very diverse, racially, culturally, along every sort of characteristic. And, I think that really makes it a more welcoming place, particularly if you're not white.
Right.
And so that has been a positive. And now my wife, who is white, she feels also in the minority. But no, I mean, everyone here is very welcoming, and it just creates an atmosphere and a culture that's very conducive to meeting people and crossing boundaries and lines of difference. So.
It was super cool yesterday after our run, or we saw this guy running who was barefoot, and a few of us noticed, and not much came of it. And then we were getting acai bowls later, and we were standing at the back of a gas station parking lot eating them. And this guy pulled up in his beat up old Nissan truck and got out and looked like he wanted to say hello, and stood there timidly, and then wandered over to us and asked us if we were running up Pupukea. We said we were, and we had a 10-minute conversation with this random guy who moved here 7 months ago from Florida. I think his name is Jason. And Jason told us about his first 50K that he trained for barefoot. And I don't know, it's just like a different vibe where everyone seems to be friendly, and it's not like anything I've experienced before.
Yeah, very welcoming community, I think, in general, and for sure.
Switching gears again, a topic I love to talk about is success and defining success and what does it mean. So before I ramble on that, what does success mean to you? How would you define it?
How do I define success? Well, sort of as a lawyer, right, or as a civil rights lawyer, you think about success in sort of two aspects or two dimensions. One is, of course, did you achieve sort of the outcome, the ideal outcome? So it's focused on the end product or the end result. But then just as important is the process, how you got there. Did you get to that outcome in a way that was correct and correct in air quotes? But so I think about that a lot, because how you get to where you want to be matters just as much as getting to your successful outcome. So I don't know if that.
No, I love that.
That was sufficient. But I think about this a lot because when we sue the government, maybe they made the right decision, but the process that the government used to get to that decision was totally irrational or unfair or biased. And in those situations, we can't condone. Just because it got to a good outcome, we can't condone what happened, because the process needs to matter as well. And so I think that means that success is also about having integrity, right? Like holding true to your values, your principles, and that's sort of a very abstract definition, or I guess it's not even a definition, but it's more how I view success. It's not just the what, it's also the how.
Very cool. Yeah, completely agree. It seems to be a trend in regards to how people answer that question, or how they think about the process versus outcome, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, this is a running podcast. We've talked about running for maybe 25% of the podcast. And I love when that happens, because it's more than just, talk to me about your splits. Tell me about, your last workout prior to this race. I think that stuff is interesting, but it doesn't help us move forward. It doesn't help us learn. It doesn't help us take risks and chances. And that's always my goal with these conversations. But to wrap it up and bring it back to running, talk to me about how running puts a nice bow or wraps everything together in this busy, seems to be pretty fulfilling life that you lead.
Yeah. I mean, I think running is sort of at the foundation of my life to some degree. I mean, I think it just keeps me grounded, because there's the habit, there's the routine. And then there's also some striking parallels between ultra running and being a civil rights lawyer, in that progress it takes a long time.
Yep.
And the big goals seem impossible to obtain. And I feel that way right now when it comes to a lot of civil rights issues, especially with the change in the Supreme Court in recent years. But just knowing that you got to put in the work day in, day out, and eventually, right, you'll get to an outcome that you can celebrate. And so there's a lot of, it's almost like a symbiotic relationship, the work that I do as a runner with the work that I do as a lawyer. And I think that's really helpful. And of course, I run to de-stress from work as well. And so there's that aspect. Movement, physical movement is just so essential to keeping grounded and sane. You know, I think it's the being a civil rights lawyer today is a pretty stressful profession, or, you know, so my 1 to 2 hours each afternoon or each evening. I'm an evening runner rather than a morning runner.
God bless you. I don't know how you do that.
So after finishing a stressful day at work, you know, getting to unwind on the trails, it's just nothing can replace that.
Awesome. For those who don't follow you, where can we find you on your corner of the internet?
Probably on Instagram. So my handle is Wookie Kim, WOOKIE KIM. I don't post super often, but that's my most public social media platform.
Awesome. Wookie, this was a blast. Thanks so much for taking some time to chat. And let's, normally I say we'll see you out there, but let's go out there.
Yeah, let's go hit the beach. Thanks, John. It was an honor.
Of course, likewise. That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next time on For the Long Run, and in the meantime, happy trails. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too. This podcast and the accompanying music has been produced by Brian Walters of Single Track Sound. For the Long Run's logo was created by Vanessa Wolf of Sterling Wolf. Show notes have been written by Ruby Wiles and is managed by Emily Holland. It takes a village.